everyone, and welcome back to Liz Sews. Today I have a new tutorial for you for the Lanai wireless bra designed by LilypaDesigns. The Lanai is a unique wireless pattern because it strives to achieve that unique lifted, separated, and supported shape that we typically associate with wired bras, but with the comfortability of a bralette. Wired bras use a cantilever system in order to provide the support. The Lanai uses a suspension system, which means it has to be a lot more full coverage than most bras. You will notice the bridge does come up much higher in this pattern, and that is so that you can fully encapsulate all of the breast tissue. This is important for the function of the bra, and if you lower the bridge, then you no longer will get that separation anymore. It gets fairly close to tacking to my chest wall without wires, though it isn't 100% perfect. I think it's one of the best I've ever seen in a wireless pattern. Now this pattern currently comes in two size sets. The first size set, which is the one that I'll be using, is sizes AA through double D. The second size set is a double D through double G. And then she's working on a third size set, which will be out in March. And that one is going to include cup sizes double G through double K. So really size inclusive. A lot of options out there. So most people are going to be able to find one of those size sets that their cups would be able to fit into. So I've split this up into 3 videos, though all of the videos are releasing today. The first video, which you're watching now, includes information on the pattern, measuring, and sewing together your cups. The next video includes information on sewing together the band pieces, dropping your cups into the band, and finishing the bottom with elastic. And then the last video includes information on the underarm elastic, straps, and hook and eye closures. Because there are so many options available in this pattern, you have lined versus unlined. You have a cross bridge versus a regular bridge. We have a 3-piece cup. We have a 4-piece cup. We have options for fabric straps or lace straps or elastic straps. I wanted to be able to show you all of the options available, which is why I was sewing both bras while filming these videos. Because there's so many options, I went ahead and put in title markings along the timeline here, as well as time markers in the description box of the video. So you can skip ahead to the next section if I'm currently showing an option that you're not interested in. I felt like this was the best way to sort of incorporate everything into the same video. So before we start sewing, let's look at measuring for this pattern. So this pattern takes a couple of different measurements in order to find your best fit. So we need a couple of measurements in order to get started on this pattern. The first we're going to look at is underbust. You need a soft measuring tape. We're going to put this around your underbust and try to keep it as parallel to the floor as possible. I like to breathe out fully, so I'm not like overly expanding my chest, and then take a firm measurement. You don't want it tight, but you definitely want it firm. This will correspond to a chart in the pattern booklet that will tell you which band size you're going to need. I found that this ran a little bit larger, so if you're on the fence between 2 sizes, I would say pick the smaller size. The next measurement we're going to need is the BCD, or bottom cup depth. This is measured ideally with the bra off. You want to do it against your bare skin, and you want to go to the apex of your bust and then follow the contours of the bust all the way down to where your wire line would sit. So if we look at it from the side, you'd be taking it from that apex point, curving it around underneath the bust, and then figuring out where it sits below. This is going to be your BCD measurement. The next measurement we're going to take is the horizontal hemisphere. This is taken from where the breast tissue attaches in the center front near the chest wall, and then following again the contours of your bust all the way around. Find the position in which it feels like the bust tissue is again connecting to your rib cage on the side underneath your arm. So this is going to be your horizontal hemisphere measurement. The last measurement you kind of need to understand is your breast root trace. I do have a video, and I can link it up in the iCards above here, of how to do a breast root trace if you are unfamiliar with this. If you already know the wire that works the best for you, you can sort of skip over that breast root trace. So what I did is just to take my 40 regular wire and compare that to the chart in the appendices of the instruction booklet to figure out which cradle looked like it was going to fit me best. So in my case, the cradle that looked like it fit me best based on my wire that I typically use, is the 3.6 cradle. I also found the horizontal hemisphere on myself was 3.6, but my bottom cup depth was only 3.1. Lily has lots of information on her website of how to grade in between sizes if your BCD and your horizontal hemisphere don't match up. I was able to grade from that 3.6 horizontal hemisphere to the 3.1 bottom cup depth, and I found a cup size that worked fairly well for me with minimal alterations. In bra making, the more sort of exact measurements you can use, so in this case, measuring the actual bust width and height, is much more accurate than taking a full bust measurement, which would also include your back in there. So now that we've talked a little bit about the pattern, let's go down onto my workstation and get started sewing up the cups.
So first up, let's take a look at the pattern pieces themselves. So when it comes to your cradle, you have two different options. You have the cross front cradle that will form sort of an X at the bridge, and you have your two-piece cradle like this. One thing to note that if you're using the cross front cradle, it is designed for stretch fabrics, and if you're using the traditional cradle, then this one is designed for stable fabrics. So take a look at what fabric you're using to sort of inform your decision as to which cradle you want to make. Another thing to note is that the standard cradle is designed for 3/4 of an inch or 19 millimeters elastic, where the cross front is designed for a much smaller elastic, which is 10 millimeters or roughly 3/8 of an inch wide. So that's another thing to take into consideration when choosing which cradle you want. You're also going to need your back band piece. Now there's lots of back band pieces included in the pattern, and what you want to make sure that you're printing out is the back band piece that corresponds with the cradle that you've printed out. So in my case, I've printed out the 3.6 cradle. I'm also going to look for the band that says it's for 3.6 inches, and then from there, select the band size that corresponds to my measurement. So in my case, a 34 band. We have lots of options when it comes to cups. So the upper cup piece will be the same no matter what you choose. You have two options on the lower cup. You can cut the lower cup in a single piece, which is going to give you more uplift, or you can cut it in two pieces, which will give you a little bit rounder bottom cup of a shape. I personally think that this one-piece cup will probably fit me a little bit better based on my anatomy, but I am going to show you both of these options in the construction phase of this bra. In addition to that choice, we also have the choice to add an internal sling. You can use this if you're wanting to make this into a nursing bra, or you can also just add this if you want just a little extra support inside of the bra itself. Again, I will show versions with and without that internal sling. And finally, we have the outer power bar. So I have made some alterations to my cup pieces. The first alteration I made was to alter my bottom cup depth. So I used the instructions that are provided on LilypaDesigns website to how to go about working your pattern if you have a different horizontal hemisphere than you do bottom cup depth. So once I had made those adjustments for my bottom cup depth, I do what's called a gut check. So I use sheer cup lining, and I just made up one of the cups out of sheer cup lining and held it up to myself to make sure that everything looked like it was where it should be. Obviously there's no elastics and things like this, but just gives you just a general idea if it's going to work or not. And sheer cup lining tends to be fairly cheap, so it's something you can make. So I sewed it up, held it up to myself, and I decided that I had a little bit extra fabric right here in the projection. One of the reasons I really like using sheer cup lining is even though I've used a traditional straight stitch on this, it's fairly easy to just sort of pull out the threads. I don't even have to do any unpicking generally. I can just pull the thread out and take it apart. Made the cup, held it up to myself, decided I needed a little bit more projection, and tore the cup apart. I trimmed down the projection on my cup where I needed it to do, transferred that change over to my cup piece, and then sewed it back up again just to check that everything looks good. And so now I think I'm pretty happy where the pattern is sitting, and I can feel relatively comfortable that it will fit okay. You know, I'm not expecting every bra to fit perfectly the first time through, but this at least gives me a better chance of getting that, because now I've held it up to myself and I know the shape looks about right, looks about the right size, and so I can move forward. So that is the cup pieces. And then the last sort of options that we have with this bra are in the straps. So you can do traditional elastic straps. We can do a lace strap, which is what this pattern piece is for, or we can do a fabric strap. And again, I'm going to show you all of those options when we get into sewing the bra. So the first step we want to tackle in sewing this guy together is looking at our lower cut pieces. So if you're choosing to use a single lower cut piece like I am on my purple bra, you can go ahead and skip this section. If you are wanting to use the two-piece lower cup, then this is what you're going to need to do. So a lot of times I have trouble orienting my cup pieces correctly, so I always like to have my pattern pieces available because it helps me understand which way my cup should be oriented. So you can see from this pattern piece what's up and what's down, and then I go ahead and copy that over with my fabric pieces. So now I can see where my two notch marks are. I can go ahead and put my fabric together, right sides touching, and I'm going to pin right at my notch mark first. And if you need to, you can pin further up and down along this seam, but I'm just going to stick with that one pin for now. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to put my cut pieces right sides together and then pin at my notch mark. So I'm going to take this over to the machine and sew with 1/4 of an inch straight stitch along that pinned edge. Now in terms of my machine, I have it set up with polyester thread. I do find polyester thread is the best for lingerie making, and it's a lot more sturdy and recommended over something like a cotton or natural silk thread. The needles that I'm going to be using are a Microtex needle. That's what works best with my machine, but I would recommend playing around with your machine and some scrap pieces of your fabric to see if what needles are working best for you. And then finally, I do have a walking foot set up on my machine. So walking foot is super handy if your machine doesn't have a dual feed or anything like that, and it just makes sure that these two pieces of fabric, the top and the bottom, aren't slipping and sliding, and they're moving at an equal pace through the presser foot. So let's get this set up under the machine and sew along this edge. So here's what it should look like once you have that sewn. You can see how this looks very similar to the pieces that we have over here. It does give you just a little bit more curvature though because of these bowed out edges. So for this bra over here, we're going to do this in a single layer. We're not using any lining material. And so what we want to do is top stitch down all of our seam allowances. So we're going to turn this over to the inside, and we're going to sort of finger press our seam allowances towards the center front. In that case, the center front is going to be that smaller triangle piece. So I just want to use my fingers to sort of press this down and give it a little bit of a memory. And I'm going to do that on both of my lower cut pieces. And then I'm going to bring this back over to the machine, and I'm going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from my original stitch line, and that's going to secure all of my seam allowances down in one place and really strengthen that seam. And here's what it looks like once that's been top stitched down. Alternatively, you could do a 3-step zigzag back and forth on this. My machine just doesn't have a 3-step zigzag, so I'm perfectly fine using a straight stitch to top stitch it down. Now the last thing I want to do before setting aside this step is just to trim away any excess of the seam allowance because we don't really need it anymore. So I just take some duck-billed scissors and try to be careful because you don't really want to cut into your actual cut piece itself, and just get rid of any of that sort of excess fabric so you get the cleanest possible insides that you can. Next up, we want to locate our upper cut pieces, so the sort of trapezoidal looking ones. Again, if you're having trouble figuring out how these pieces should be oriented, I would look at your pattern pieces because it always helps me figure things out. In this case, the side that is sort of a straighter line is going to coincide with the side of my smaller triangle on my lower cut piece. And then the side that's sort of scooped in is going to go over top of the more rectangular side. So just like we did for the lower cut piece, we want to make sure we have everything oriented the correct direction, and then we take these two pieces right sides together and we're going to pin them in place along that arc. So I have these two pinned into place. Now I have these pinned into place, I can go ahead and sew them with a straight stitch at 1/4 of an inch. Once it's sewn, it should look something like this. For a single layer bra, we can now flip out the top cup piece, and just like we did for the lower cup, we can sort of finger press our seam allowances to one side. In this case, I'm going to press mine towards the upper cup. And then I take this back over to the machine and top stitch so that I'm going through the upper cup piece as well as all of my seam allowances to secure them into place. So now these have been top stitched into place, and I have gone ahead just like before and trimmed away all of the excess seam allowance along that curve. Now if you want, at this point in time, you might be able to take this over to your iron and your tailor's ham and sort of press this out to get a nice smooth curve. I try to avoid pressing my lingerie fabrics just because they are made out of synthetic materials, and there's nothing worse than burning a hole in something because your iron was just a tad too hot. So I'm not going to press this. Most of the time, if you see little puckering or not puckering, but like bubbling like this where the seam isn't lying completely flat, you can sort of run your hands along the seam, maybe your fingernail, to sort of loosen up those threads. And a lot of times, once you put the bra on and it's stretched across your bosom, that those puckers sort of go away. So that is going to be for the single layer. For my purple bra, I'm going to be doing a similar thing, but since this bra is lined, the method in which I attach my upper cup to my lower cup changes ever so slightly. So I want to take my lower cup pieces and make sure that they're perfectly aligned over top of each other. At this point, I like to pin these two pieces together just to make sure nothing shifts around and moves. Now I'm going to take my upper cup piece. I'm going to take my exterior fabric only, so in this case this is my bra tool, and I'm going to apply it right sides together with my bra tool, and I'm going to pin that into place. Now I want to take this and turn around to the other side. I also want to turn this to the other side and then put this lining material attached to the lining of my lower cut piece. So you should have 4 layers now pinned together, and it should be outer and lining. So the 2 outer fabrics are touching each other and the 2 lining fabrics are touching each other. And in terms of this being a sandwich, you should have the upper cup is your bread. So the 2 pieces that are on the outermost sides are your upper cut piece, and then the meat of the sandwich, what's inside of those, is going to be your lower cut piece. So just like with a single layer bra, I'm going to sew this with a straight stitch at 1/4 of an inch along that pinned edge. So we are going to open out our upper cut piece on the front and along the back. And so the advantage of doing your bra like this is, of course, now all of your seam allowances are hid inside of the cup itself. You don't have any seam allowances sticking out. So that's one of the reasons why I really like lining my bras. It does take an extra step, obviously, a little bit more pinning and practice, but it gives you a much cleaner finish. So once I open out both of my upper cut pieces from the front and the back, I can go ahead and top stitch this into place as well, just like we've done for the single layer bra. And here is what the lined bra looks like once that is topped and stitched into place, and what it looks like from the inside of the bra. We don't have to worry about trimming away our excess seam allowances because they're all tucked inside. Now we're going to go ahead and stabilize the neckline edge of our cup. This is the same whether you're working in a single layer or a double layer. For stabilization, I'm going to be using this 1/4 inch clear elastic, though really you should be looking for something that has no stretch whatsoever. I purchased this off of Amazon. It has very minimal stretch, so this is probably about the fullest extent I can stretch it. And considering I have such a small bust size, it should be fine to stabilize the neckline edge. So what I'm going to do is take this 1/4 inch stabilizer and align it along that straight edge of the upper neckline. And then I'm going to sew it with a straight stitch on the side of the elastic that's closer to the inside of the cup, if that makes sense. So not along this outer edge, but along the inside edge. So I've now applied the stabilizer along all of these edges of my cup pieces. So next we're going to fold it over twice. So this is the right side of the bra. Let's look at the inside of the cup. We're going to fold over the elastic once and then twice. So you should have a really clean edge up along the top of the elastic, and a little bit of the stabilizer might be peeking out the bottom, but from the right side of the bra, you should not be able to see the stabilizer at all. The stabilizer will be touching the lining of your bra. So finally, we're going to take this back over to the machine and stitch this into place. I'm going to be using, I think I'm going to go with a straight stitch on this because that's going to look the nicest. Here you can see what it looks like once that stabilization has been sewn to the inside. You really want to take your time with this and make sure you get a seam that is nice and firm and stable, because of course this is one of the suspension points which makes this bra work so well as a wireless bra and giving you lift and separation. Now we can move on to the final piece of our cup, which is the power bar. So for our single layer cup, we want to find the power bar and make sure we have the correct power bar going with the correct side. This sort of S curve is going to be what attaches itself to the cup, and this part that looks like a little bite taken out of a cookie is where it's going to be the underarm edge later on. So if we're using a single layer of fabric, this becomes really simple. We just need to, again, align these two with right sides facing and then pin it into place all along that curve. And here's what it looks like once I pin that into place. If you've done it correctly, you should have an overhang of about 1/2 inch on the top of the power bar. And that's because on the cup piece itself, it's folded down, and we are going to fold this down as well after we finish sewing it into place. So don't be concerned if you have about 1/2 inch overhang on the power bar up on the top of the edge. So for the single layer cup, we are, of course, as always, going to sew this with a straight stitch at 1/4 inch along the pinned edges. So once you've sewn on the power bar, it should look something like this. So just like we've done for the rest of this cup, we're going to turn it to the back side. And I want to finger press all of my seam allowances towards the power bar section this time. Then I'm going to go ahead and top stitch this from the right side just to the power bar side of my original seam allowance. When I reach the top of the cup, I'm going to fold in this excess material here so that what I get is one continuous line from the cup piece. And I'm going to top stitch, top stitch, top stitch, sink my needle, rotate, and then top stitch on this section as well, securing down that extra little bit of fabric to the inside. And here's what it looks like once that has been top stitched, and you can see how this line sort of continues along the neckline to the upper edge here. Now we can go to the inside of our bar cup and clip away all of that excess seam allowance along that power bar curve as well on the top here. And now I've done that for both of these cups. The last step I want to do on this cup is inserting our internal sling. So here we have our internal sling pieces. Like I said, it looks a little bit like an arrowhead. We want to go ahead and fold this in half. If you want, you can take this over to your iron and give it a nice press. I had fairly good luck with pressing this nylon, just making sure that I use a very low heat. And once you have that folded in half perfectly, you want to align this sort of cookie bite edge with that cookie bite edge of your cup piece. I like to align the corners first, and of course I'm working on the inside of the bra because this is going to be an internal sling. Slings are really helpful to help direct your breast tissue in a more forward position. If you are what we call an east-west shape, which means everything's sort of like sitting underneath the armpits or over to the side, it can really help push you forward in a more idealized shape. Slings are also helpful to provide additional support if you find that your breast tissue is really dense or heavy. And then also can help just reduce strain on the cup fabric itself. That's why you tend to see a lot of these internal slings in a darted bra cup, because that needs a little bit relief on the fabric. The other reason why you might include an internal sling is if you are looking to turn your bra into a nursing bra. And Lily actually does have directions in the appendices of this pattern if you're interested in adding nursing clips to your bra to turn it into a nursing bra. So next we're going to switch back over to the purple bra and show you how to do these steps with a double layer. So now looking at the double layer cup, so the one with the lining, we're going to do it similarly in the way that we attached the upper cup to the lower cup piece. And that is, we're going to take our power bar and we're going to pin the fashion fabric side to the fashion fabric side of the cup. And then we're going to flip this around and pin the lining to the lining side of the cup. So you should have this in a sandwich where the meat of the sandwich is your upper and lower cup pieces and the bread of the sandwich is your two power bar pieces. So here's what it looks like once it's pinned into place. And we're going to sew this similarly to the single layer cup with one small exception. So we're going to start at the bottom of the cup. I'm going to sew it 1/4 of an inch with a straight stitch all the way up this pinned edge. Once we reach the top of the cup, you want to sink your needle down into the project, rotate it, and then continue sewing with a straight stitch across this straight upper edge portion here. That way we finish this edge without having to do any turning and flipping later. So once you've sewn along this power bar up here and down the curve, it should look something like this. This is of course the inside of my bra. When you flip out the power bar, you can see now that that upper edge has already been finished and you don't have to worry about it. You just want to pull everything sort of taut, making sure that your lining and your exterior fabric are still lining up. And then we're going to take this over to the machine and top stitch this again along that power bar curve. You could also, I might top stitch this along this upper edge as well, just so it continues that top stitching from my stabilization on the neckline. So here's what it looks like once we've top stitched along that power bar edge and the upper neckline. So for this bra, I'm not going to do the internal power bar, but I used that same pattern piece to cut out a bit in lace. So instead of cutting this out on the fold, I used that fold line to put along the scalloped edge of my lace. So I just have one layer of lace here, and I'm actually going to apply this externally to the bra as a nice little decorative accent. Obviously, doing it in this method on the outside is purely for decoration, and can't be used for nursing clips. This is an entirely optional thing, and it's not something that's talked about in the directions, but I just wanted to add something to my bra to make it unique. Now we've completed the cups, which is quite a feat, so you should be able to pat yourself on the back.
That's the end of the first video on the Lanai wireless pattern from LilypaDesigns. The rest of the videos in this series are linked down in the description box below, so you can go ahead and keep sewing. See you next time. Take care.